Yeah, speaking. Is that Jason?
Jason here, yes. How's it going, Steve?
Not bad, thank you. How are you?
Very good. You've been working hard recording a new album for Yes?
Well, yeah. That's one of our main projects at the moment, yeah.
So where are you up to in this project?
Well, we're not finished. We won't be playing any of it until the summer on stage. But we're developing the album. We've got a lot of the titles all shaped up. There's finessing, more vocals, finals and mixing. And there's a bit of a way to go, but a lot of the material is standing the course.
So would you say this recording session is going kind of like a magnification album, or, going back to the old roots of Yes?
Well, I pray it's not like magnification, because although those albums turned out to be good, they were good after a great deal of difficulty. Fluid albums are quite... the older albums, certainly, we were blinded by our own enjoyment for it. And in the 70s, when we made, like, Fragile and Close to the Edge in the same damn year, you could see we were having a good time, So I wouldn't say that this album's like either. I don't want to make albums like the last Yes albums. They were tense, they were difficult, they were problematic, they went over budget. They did everything that was wrong. They didn't sound bad in the end, but they was a bit like crawling across cut glass to make a record, They weren't easy. Now, this has not been anything as difficult as that, but it's had its own internals. It's always had some internals. But as you do with close quarters. But I would be fantasizing to say it's as dreamy, if you like, as the 70s. But it's good fun, and we're working well together. And it's nice to be working with Trevor Horn. He's an interesting guy that we've got special, kind of connections with, and that means there's a depth to it. This isn't a transient, just passing by sort of contact. It's a kind of depthful contact where Trevor understands the group in ways that even we don't, because he's kind of morphed the 70s and 80s as far as Yes is concerned. But, he's very much a now person. He's about what have you got, what can we do, what have I got, what can I add? So it's really like a building process. It's almost like a huge construction job, where you're kind of constructing the foundations, and then you eventually put in the leather seats and the telephones into the building. But basically, I think it's going to be pretty good. But one always loves what you're actually doing in recording terms. What you're doing at the moment is usually feels like the best thing you've ever done, and it doesn't always turn out to be the best thing you've done, but it certainly feels like the best thing you've done. So maybe this one will actually turn out to be like the best thing we've done, because there is a potential that for a long time we haven't set the bar, for Yes in this era. We did a bit, as I said, with magnification.
Now, I take it this album's digital.
Digital, yeah. We're digital guys. It would be foolhardy to start trying to make an analog album of this complexity with the choices that we want to be able to have, because so much is about post-production now. Record stuff, and then you develop it even after you've recorded it. And that's somewhat inevitable. But with Berrigan, we do have a responsibility to make records that sound like we play them together. Which is fundamentally what we do anyway. But obviously, you can get records that are like, music on steroids, because it just wasn't a loving experience, But I think that's what we're doing. We're trying to make a particular kind of record that's suitable and lives up to our dreams and our audiences.
Another thing too we should mention is you've been keeping real busy in the studio. You recorded with Asia Omega, the album, and
Yes.
Steve Howe Trio Traveling album. So you've been keeping really busy.
Well, also Motif was my solo guitar record I brought out a little while back, and Homebrew 4. So I like to, it's not that I like to be productive. It is a natural part of me to be productive. If I'm unproductive, you definitely know I'm not happy, because my productivity is partly what makes me happy, yeah. So I've been recording. The Asia project went well. We now did 2 albums, Phoenix and Omega, and I'm very proud of Asia too. I love John's writing and his bass playing and his singing. I've seen him come from such a place that you wouldn't want anybody to be, to such a place of strength, and of course Carl Palmer is an incredible drummer who wins an audience over almost after about 3 beats, all eating out of his hands. And obviously Jeff and I go back, a long way together through drama with Yes, and then through the early stages. And we're a great team together, keyboard, guitar, it's a strength. So generally I would say that Asia's one of the most sensible bands as far as making records. We get a selection of material. There's this few of my songs kicking around in there, and basically we get on with it, and we don't make life difficult for ourselves, and we've enjoyed making those 2 records. So who knows, we might make another one. I don't know.
And you're going on tour with Asia in April? That's
right. We start the 28th, and we do a sort of shortest tour, about 3 weeks into May, before we most probably do some South American dates, and then some UK European dates, which kind of brings us round to about the 18th of June. So there's a nice run for Asia, just a sort of, nothing's too stressful there, none of the legs are too long. We're just happy to find our feet, having, been back together for about, this will be 5 years. So, it's been quite a reunion, and the fact that it's all original members, kind of, you can sort of understand why we're doing it more, I think, than if it. Well, I don't think we'd be doing it if it wasn't original members, is what I'm saying.
And also, we should add that Yes is having a tour in March.
That's right. We have a nice little comfort tour where we're working our markets. We're starting down south, and we're ending up in the east after Florida. When the weather gets a little better. Last year we did a February tour, and that was very adventurous. So we're basically, Yes is a touring band. It's fundamental to our existence that we find niches to go out and play in our different territories. And this is one that, as I said, we did last year in February. We've moved it down a month. It's not what you call a major market tour. We do some secondary markets. We do a bit of casinoing, and basically it's a kind of stepping stone towards the summer. We didn't want to not tour until July, but by doing this we're kind of striking a balance between our recording project and then the summer tour when the album comes out.
One thing I should ask is, going to recording techniques, compared to a Fragile album to today, would you say there's a big difference in the way you guys record now?
Difference. But yeah, I mean it's a phenomenal difference. It's a very enjoyable difference in most ways. Of course, what you've got is what you've got. It's like asking yourself, say you were in 1972 and you're driving a car. Let's think, I was driving a car. It was called an NSU R080. They never really came to this country. But it was a great little car. It had a Wankel engine. It was very futuristic. But at that time, that was a very, very modern car. It looked very modern. It looked far more modern than anything. But it broke down. It didn't work very well. So, if you look at it now, you've got in a car today, you've got ABS, maybe four-wheel drive, you've got cruise control, you're running on unleaded gas, So, as much as the driving's changed, I'm a bit of a driving fanatic, really, I suppose, but the driving's changed, the recording's changed, they've changed, because now, of course, cars are full of computers also, and that's what recording is. So, really, to strike it right where it is, it's because of the computer that recording's so different, and we welcome that because I've always liked listening to music in a studio, and the way that you can zoom in on particular sounds. For instance, you can listen to the bass drum on its own, with nothing else playing. But that's all very well, but in the 70s. But when you listen to the bass drum now on its own in digital, obviously, you can do a lot more to it. You can change the pitch. You could change where that beat is in the bar if you wanted to, or you could move it a microcosm just to make it feel better. You could also treat that one particular beat, just one beat in the whole song, you could treat differently. You could put a vast reverb on, the last beat of the bar. I could go on and on, bore you tears, But basically, there's so much, like I said earlier, so much you can do in post-production now. It's astounding. And it's the same with a movie. I mean, when Hitchcock shot Psycho, he had to get the picture right. But now, if Hitchcock was still alive, he could invent that shower. He could digitally enhance it. He could add the blood afterwards. But Hitchcock had to get it all right, and that's as different. It's quite an interesting comparison, really, cars and films, with the way we record music. It's really the same. I mean, we've endorsed, adopted, and gone down the line with the technology. And at first there was all that reluctance in the 80s, digital, all the purists were like, digital's horrible, I hate digital. And now we can't live without it. It's like a camera. I mean, do you want an old analog camera, the one that you put the film in and have to pull it across the gate of the back and then close it quickly so the light didn't get in it? That sounds archaic. No, you've got a digital camera, you've got your stick. So really, if you think about that, it's exactly the same for recording. So yeah, it's changed vastly. And there's only a few areas that aren't improving. One could argue that the whole process of the way we listen to our music, certainly on an MP3 or an iPod or anything like that, that's rubbish. I mean, in quality terms, those things are not anywhere near even as good as a CD. CD, an SA CD is about as good as you can get it today if you've got an SACD player to play it on. But basically, a Super Audio CD is pretty damn good. So the quality has gone up, but the feel, in other words, the old-fashioned, it's almost like the old-fashioned feel. You say the same thing on a camera. Look at an early Leica camera, the lens. Look at a nice early Mercedes. Look at all the things that we know. A lovely film like The Sound of Music. You almost couldn't make that's an analog. It's all analog early. So I still think there is a conflict between going forwards. But that's the same with everybody who gets older. They say it used to be better. People used to be friendlier. It used to be warmer. It used to be cheaper. Everything used to be better in the old days. And what's better about it is it felt right, And sure, digital is a bit of it's a bit cold. It's a bit icy. So we've learning to warm up the digital world so that it's kind of enhanced almost with a reflection of analog. So that you can even make a digital sound analog, just by putting a box over it, a plug-in that analyzes the digital sound. Can you imagine? We've got all this way to digital, and now we're making a digital sound like an analog because we like the warmth, because there was something beautiful. A record is actually a pretty good sound, even though everybody thought it was shit. When cassettes came along, cassettes were shit. But a record actually has the potential to be a very, very high-quality sound because there's warmth. There's warmth in the bass. So it's taken a while for digital to get warmed up, and that's what it needed to do. So that's a very, extremely long answer to your question. But I do have 20 minutes more if you want to talk longer. I saw you were down for 5 or 10 minutes. I've never said anything in 5 or 10 minutes that's worth printing, let me say that. It's too short. Anytime you like. If you want another 10 minutes, that's fine. If you want 15, we can talk until 1:30 if you want. But if you've only got a couple of questions, then we will finish early. But you just see where it goes if you like. But I haven't got a rush after this, right?
All right, good stuff. Talking about your guitars that you're playing today on this album that we've yet to hear, are you playing the classic guitars from your collection?
Yeah. Yep. I mean, the 175, my 1964 175 Gibson comes in for all the crucial, most important things, mainly improvising, where I have a nice theme to play, I'll get that guitar and then I'm going to stretch out on it. There's one track that really does get the steel guitar comes out, the Fender Dual String Master, whatever it's called. I think it's called a Dual String Master, yeah. Or it's called a Dual String Master Professional. But it's a remarkable steel guitar. So I'm using like my Les Paul Junior, my Fender Telecaster, Stratocaster. Yeah, I mean, when you ask me about modern guitars, that's a pretty unusual question because I don't play a lot of really, really new guitar except Line 6. Line 6, I use the Variax, which I think is a remarkable guitar. It's got about 20 different guitars in the same guitar. all digital modelling, and there's no MIDI delay or any nonsense like that. It's perfectly usable, very cheap guitars that have this array and certain sounds, and you have to find them yourself, are spectacular in there. The 335, the Les Paul, they're all really great sounds. So that's a guitar I use. Certainly, I've got my old traditional guitars we've been talking about, Tele, Strat, 175. I haven't used the stereo on this album yet, but that's another great classic Yes-sounding guitar. So yeah, I go across that. Amps, yeah, I use a little bit more Vox, AC50, Marshall 50, Line 6 Vita, and the Fenders. I've had a funny look. I've used Fenders for most of my life, but just every now and again, I just can't get on with them. They rattle, they buzz, they're annoying or something, they let me down and I get cross, and I've got most probably about 15 Fenders back home. And at the moment I'm not touring or using a whole lot of Fenders, but every now and again I must confess a Twin, a Fender Twin's a great amp to have, and we use those as well, so I have a Twin as well. But I have about 25 guitars here. I have a Gibson mandolin. I have a Fender electric mandolin. So I have a little selection, I say little, of instruments that I basically think are important. I have a Gretsch, for that time when I say, that sounds wrong, that doesn't sound right, let's play all the Gretsch. So there are certain times when the characteristic of a guitar cries out to me, this is wrong, get another characteristic. So, slightly inspired by the development of keyboards in itself, made me aware that keyboards sound phenomenally different. A PPG, an EMS, a Moog, a Prophet, they're all very different. And I started to think, wow, guitars are the same. Rickenbackers, Dan Electros, Gretsch's, Gibsons, Fenders, they're all different. And I'm the guy who, his ears are so tuned to this that I distinctly notice the changes. And I distinctly want to change, even though my favourite guitar is such a joy to play. I just cannot play it all the time. It does not do everything, even though it does most of what I want, the 175. But it doesn't do a steel guitar. It doesn't do a tremolo on Strat. It doesn't do a Tele back pickup. It doesn't do those. So that's why I have these other guitars. And I love guitar collecting. I'm constantly, not constantly, but periodically, I go on the internet. I'm on Gruen guitars. I'm on Gary's guitars. I'm on mandolins. I'm looking at these guitars going, wow, hang on, should I or should I not? All my one's worth, so I constantly inform myself by staying in touch with the guitar collecting world. And also I sell guitars, I've obviously got far too many, and I once had 175. Now that's nothing compared to some collections I've seen. I've seen a collection of 750 guitars. One person owns 750 guitars. So I wasn't actually that bizarre. I went to 175 and thought, this is ridiculous. I don't even know whether I can find a guitar I want. I've got to get them down. So I got it down to 100. And basically I've been kind of crawling down. But there again, new things come out. And then I get another one, or, I need something, I get it. And Martin have been fantastic. Obviously we've developed the two Steve Howe models now, the 0018 Steve Howe and the M338 Steve Howe. So those are, I have a few of those. So, and the same with Gibson, we've got the 1964 Steve Howe 175, which I'm also really proud of. So I'm really spoiled. I am spoiled with guitars. But it was something I set up in my own mind, where I was going to try and buy everything in the Gibson catalogue. And as I was just doing that, I realised I didn't actually want all those guitars. I wanted part of what was in the Fender catalogues and part was in all the other things. So I just became an ardent collector. But also, what I collect that very few people collect is antique guitars. And although one of the reasons they don't get collected is they don't increase in value. They're the most underrated antique in the entire world. Strange enough, because, let me just finish, because the vintage guitars, which is like 1950s, because they're worth so much money, a 58 Les Paul can be worth anything from $250,000 to $500,000. That is insane. But an antique guitar, there's only one of in the entire world that I bought, say, 40 years ago, is not worth 1 penny more now than it is when I bought it. Now, that is ridiculous. My guitar should have escalated by 400 to 600% in that time. And I'm not bitching that they didn't, but I just think it's a missed opportunity for other collectors. And that's partly why it is people are missing it because there's no real appreciation for. There's a couple of makes who do appreciate, and the Ponormo guitar, I have one of those. That is worth money, good money, and it has increased, but not as much as an early violin or an early flute, which are very sought after and they keep increasing, like your Les Paul vintage. But that's a peculiar thing. But that's a particular. I collect lyre guitars which stand up on their own. So I have particular interests which are somewhat diverse from rock and roll. And but after all, I love country music. You know, I love Alison Krauss and Union Station. They're my favourite band in the whole world. If I want to listen to something, it's Alison Krauss, Union Station. And I've always had these diverse tastes. In other words, I'm playing in a prog band and I'm listening to Vivaldi. Or I'm in Asia and I'm listening to jazz. Or, you know what I mean? I'm in the trio and I'm listening to Alison Krauss. I'm never strictly conforming to my musical work. In other words, I'm most probably fighting my musical work. In other words, if I'm doing prog, I've got to have an outlet that is nothing like prog. So I listen to a lot of music that seems on the surface to be completely irrelevant to my musical world, but it isn't, because it is yet another place I'm going, another step. And there's going to be a release later this year that I'm still keeping secret until we announce it. It's going to be on a major label. It's a completely different solo album that I finished and is completely, completely finished. It'll most probably be out in September. So again, I'm not trying to show people this, but it seems that I am showing people that I am reinventing myself, and that's the best way, I think, to have a career. I mean, after Salvador Dali did the same thing. He didn't paint serialistic paintings all the time. You know, he had different eras. And I think that's what artists do, or good artists need to do, is not just go, oh, I'm a serialist, I'm just going to paint serialism, and then for 50 years paint serialistic pictures. No, it's the same with me. I'm not going to play prog guitar for 50 years. I haven't. I've played Spanish guitars, I've played steel guitars, I've played country music, I've played jazz a bit. So basically that is enjoyable to me. It would be awful if I'd only played in 12-bar mode and I was a blues guitarist. To me, that would have been driving me crazy. I think I would have committed suicide with the blues, because I cannot play one kind of music and be content. And the blues is a fascinating... I said something the other day, I could play 12 bars all night. I mean, I do like 12 bars, I do like the blues, but I will not be confined to one kind of music. Speech. Sorry, Jason. But
that's great.
Speech. That's where I'm coming from. I will not conform, and I will not stand still.
Going to a character like Robert Johnson, what's your take on someone like him?
Well, you know, funny enough, that's a great question. Last night I was reading some of Keith Richards' book, and he talks about Robert quite a bit in there. And I've really tried to connect with Robert Johnson, but what happened to me was I connected with somebody else. I see somebody else who's a little bit later and a bit more, a little bit later, Big Bill Brunsey. To me, if I'd not heard Big Bill Brunsey, I don't know, I would be a very, very different person. Because, you see, I like Robert Johnson was, I like country blues, not city blues. You know, city blues is electric, country blues is acoustic. And I think it's highly inspiring, you know, to be able to tap into that country blues. So for me, Big Bill Brunsey was everything that Robert Johnson is to a lot of other people. He's not as technical, and he's not as, you know, maybe he wasn't as clever, but what came with Big Bill Brunsey was what I needed. To have that kind of belief in that music, because of the voice as well, because he was such a great singer. Brunsey kind of encapsulated that, because I tried Leadbelly, you know, and I tried Robert Johnson, but I did like, the guys I did like were Lightning Hopkins, Muddy Waters, Buddy Guy on his early records, just like Keith Richards. I agree with Keith Richards completely that, you know, Buddy Guy somewhere along the way just, like, you know, was trying too hard. But before he started trying too hard, he had the most brilliant voice and guitar interplay I've ever heard. So, I mean, the blues is really important. But obviously, I was playing the blues before the In Crowd, before Tomorrow, before my later 60s groups. But, you know, basically my early groups were blues groups. And I did go around playing the blues. But I suppose I was always hearing a more jazzy sort of blues, you know, because I saw Wes Montgomery when I was 16, and on stage he was amazingly bluesy, much more so than on his recording. But I mean, you know, Robert Johnson. I'm always trying to understand how I can access this guy. I've got the box set with all his recordings, you know. It's just I never connected with him as much as with Bill Brunsey. So, you know, the blues has had a big effect on rock, not one that I particularly wanted it to have. You know, I mean, I wanted it to have an effect, but I didn't want every rock guitarist to become a blues guitarist, which did happen. And that's when I really dug my heels in, and that's when I said to myself, I will not play blues cliches anymore. You know, I never played do da 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 da. You know what I mean? I don't do it. You know, although it's fun and I like doing it in private, I don't. In my career, in my recording work and on my stage work, I don't do a lot of blues. I might do occasional blues, and on a few of my solo albums, there's a track called Inside Out Muse, which is a blues. And so I obviously do like it, but it's got to be kept under control. Otherwise, you know, it's quite contagious. It's quite easy to sit there and, you know, just revel in a 12 bar. So I guess what you're hearing is really that you're hearing somebody who likes it, but is also scared of it, because I didn't want it to pigeonhole me. I didn't want to stay with the blues. You know, I had to move on.
Let's take a completely different picture of us here. Let's say your inspirations to create a masterpiece like Mood for a Day. What was your feelings that day that you made that?
Well, musical construction is really tantalizing. In other words, it could have started, you know, it would have been wrong. It had to start with, you know. So finding that out is not easy. You know, it's a difficult, I mean, it's arduous almost. You've got these tunes, and you've got to work out what the running order of them is. And that's partly what I spend quite a lot of time in composition, is really what happens first, what happens next, and how does it end? You know, it's a really simple way of talking about composition. How does it start, what happens in the middle, and how does it end? And that's one of preoccupation that I have. Obviously, I don't really think about it quite so mundanely, but Mood for a Day was most of my pieces come along, they drift into my consciousness kind of slowly. You know, I might have part of it, and I'll be thinking about that for a couple of years, and then suddenly it'll all come together with another part, you know, so it's almost like the icing on the, I'm waiting for the icing to come so I can put it on the cake and say it's over. You could say it's like that. But basically, Mood for a Day was a brave step in a new direction, because at that point I'd only written a few instrumental pieces, Clap being the main piece, and then I felt I wasn't going to follow Clap with another Chet Atkins style country picking. You know, so, you know, I had a nice Spanish guitar. My wife bought me a Contreras, and, but just before that happened, I basically recorded Mood for a Day on a Kondo guitar, which is I don't know, it's handmade, but it was a proper Spanish guitar. And that flamenco guitar was what I was, you know, aspiring to, if you like. I was trying to find out how I could convincingly, since I'd recorded Clap, how I convincingly do something like that, but it was a different style of music, but it was on Spanish guitar. That, to me, was the challenge that I had in front of me. And lo and behold, the whole of Yes decided, we decided to all do a solo piece on Fragile, which meant that there was room then for Mood for a Day on Fragile, following Clap on the Yes album quite closely. So I was thrilled with that. But yeah, that's an ecliptic piece. I mean, you know, it's the first Spanish guitar piece I'd ever written. You know, to follow was the Leaves of Green song, Tales and Telegraphic Oceans, and then, you know, Surface Tension and other tunes that I wrote for Beginnings and the Steve Howe album. So basically, that was, like Clap was, it was the first, and Mood for a Day was the first of me getting confident and getting compositional on these pieces. I don't know what I can say about it other than the title summed it up perfectly, because it wasn't really a piece that started and the tune developed. It was really different themes that were linked together. And I slightly developed them as the tune goes down, but there were key pieces. I do truly love Mood for a Day. I could say that Clap and Mood for a Day if I didn't write anything after those, I would still be quite happy, because those two pieces were quite formidable in themselves. The fact that I've now written about 35 guitar solos of my own, including Sketches in the Sun, Ram, and a lot of others, that's enjoyable. In fact, Motif, which came out a couple of years ago, has no less than 4 new solo pieces on it. It's slightly concealed on that album of re-recordings, because I've never really pulled together a CD where you could actually hear me playing continuously in solo mode, because like we said, Clap was on an AES album, and that kept happening. My solos would be seen as a relief in another context, like it is on a stage show when Yes or Asia break and they say, oh, Steve's going to do a solo. That to me is an opportunity to keep my solo career, my solo guitar work alive, because otherwise it's pretty dead. I mean, I've been busy with Yes and Asia for years now and hardly had time to do any solo shows, but I have, because each night I play 2 tunes. And I change those tunes every night I play, as much as I want or much as I can. And if I go to a country I've never been to, like Paraguay, I play Mood for a Day and Clap, because they've never heard me play, they've never seen me play. So I went to Paraguay in November, and that's what I did. So if I've never been to a country, I will play my 2 strongest pieces. But if I'm touring America or Europe or Japan, for that matter, I will change my pieces every night. So if people do come to more than one night, they usually see me play different pieces, which reinstates what I'm saying, is that I keep my solo playing alive while I'm in the groups, and I need to do that. So that gives me a moment of flashing back. We can be having, if we're having a great group show, that's great. I can have a nice spot, but if we're having a tough group show and then suddenly I'm playing guitar and you see me smiling, that I always feel the joy when I'm playing solo. Basically, I could sum it up like this: that is why I'm doing all this. That music, Clap, Mood for a Day, and all the other 30 pieces that follow are much more about what I am than Yes or Asia will ever be. There's 100% of me in those tunes, and take Sketches in the Sun. That piece, I love to play on acoustic guitar, and now, after recording it on an electric 12-string down electro on the other, on GTR back in the 80s. But so I developed the sound of a tune sometimes after it's written, but usually the compositions are quite family-oriented. What with Clap being for Dylan, lots of tunes I've written are for my family. That's a moment I can show my love and respect for them. And Second Initial wasn't a solo piece originally, but George's theme, all these tunes, Jay's theme, so all these things, they're very much, they're where my depth is, if you like, where the well of my love is it's being voiced by these solo compositions.
Let's say you're going to a gig or something. Can you recall your repertoire quite quick?
And now which part of the repertoire are you referring to?
Let's say with all the discography you've ever created, which is really big.
Yeah.
Let's say somebody names you a song in an evening, or I don't know. Can you dig that out of your head that quick?
Pretty much so. A remarkable thing did happen. If I am party or I wrote, if I write or I am party to writing a song or a tune, it never goes away. It's always in my mind. I can always play it. So somebody said to me today, I've done the test. There are radical exceptions, but like Sound Chaser by Yes is one of the most daunting, scary, techno, crazy pieces we ever did, and I can play parts of it, But like when Yes say, oh look, shall we play this song or that song? I'm usually the guy that can remember quite well, but then I go and research it and learn it meticulously. But yeah, I do have a lot of the repertoire. I did a tour 2 years ago where I played with Asia and Yes, and people said, how are you going to do that? How are you going to, 1 minute, and it was really easy, different guitars and different clothes, and I could just switch over to one set or another. But what I do enjoy is the question you asked me, is that I do seem to remember most of what I invent, and it does stay there. So it's easier that's why keeping in touch with my solo pieces is nice on these tours. but I do that at soundcheck. You know, I might play 2 or 3 pieces at soundcheck and play 2 different pieces at the concert, so that I'm always refreshing my memory. But yeah, one of my tests when I play the guitar, I like to explain, I don't practice. I don't believe in practicing. I never have. It's not because I've been playing 50 years that I say this, but I've never believed that practicing was interesting. It was really boring going da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. But it's good to get to movement, to get your muscles working. But as soon as you can, don't do that. Improvise, you know. And the key to my survival as a musician is improvisation. And I sit and improvise, but in that improvisation, suddenly I'll think, I'd like to play, let's say, you know, I'd like to play Jay's theme, you know. And I'll start playing it and attempt to play that perfectly, and yet I haven't played it for 3 months, or maybe even a year. But I will go for it, almost as if I'm on stage. I'm just enjoying myself sitting in my guitar room playing. But I always have a recording, you know, I can always record, so, because that's where I get most of my writing comes from improvisation. It doesn't come from me sitting at a piano with a stave of music and a pen. You know, I can't think like that. All I can do, the way I develop music is to write. So every now and again I'll play one of my pieces, even like Surface Tension, that's not an easy piece to play. But I'll start playing it and I'll go to myself, this has got to be right. I mean, you're going to play this perfectly and you're going to remember everything. So if I don't remember something, I'll be pretty surprised. But so that's my way of practicing and staying in touch with my music, and that's how important this playing the guitar is. I thought the novelty might have worn off by now, but I'm still a complete guitar fanatic, and I'm really, really surprised at that, because it goes in waves, you know, waves of collecting guitars and not collecting so much, the waves of playing and not playing so much, and then the waves of writing and not writing so much. So there's a kind of process, almost like a rippling effect, where if I'm doing a lot of touring, I might not be doing so much writing, but then if I'm doing some recording, I might be doing more writing. There's a kind of mishmash of what my requirements are as a guitarist, what I'm expected to do as a guitarist. It kind of, they wave, you know, and if I'm playing live, I haven't got a lot more time for much else, but then in the winter is a good time to write music, and if I'm not usually touring in January and February, I never used to do anything, and I just used to write in the country, in England, back home. But now, I take more work and yes, recording and blah blah blah. So, you know, there'll be different years that I don't do what I prefer to do, but I'll make up for it. And you know, writing is very, very important. So the 3 things I do: writing, performing and recording are all equally in competition with each other, and I enjoy all of them equally. I mean, you know, writing is very engrossing. I mean, you can sit for hours just contemplating how you're going to do something. You know, it's fascinating. This started with you asking me how I wrote Mood for a Day about 10 minutes ago, and I think your questions have been quite interesting, because, you know, I don't like interviews that the answer is yes, or the other answer is no. So you've given me questions that I've had to address. You know, I've had to come up with things to say. I love it.
So one final here, Steve. When is the Steve Howe book coming out?
Well, yeah, you had the Steve Howe guitar collection, and then quite a few years ago I started talking about the fact that I'd written up quite a lot of my book. And what I did, I got up to 1972, I think, in my book. And that was quite an achievement. And what happened was that I've had so much other things to do that, you know, I haven't really addressed that very much. So, but I have a plan. The plan is about expansion. It's a bit like music, really. I look at those 15,000 words and think, right, well, that isn't quite right. It isn't quite thick enough. There isn't quite enough depth. So I want to bring a little more to it. So really, when I get another block period, when I can get back to it, I will. It's been a couple of years. It's been sitting there, you know, kind of prettily holding itself together in my computer. And of course, what it's about is a work, you know, a work in music. You know, work in music. Really, it's about. It mainly connects about. I found that it's not easy to, and I noticed this with Bob Dylan and other people's books, is that if you're writing about your career. I mean, Bill Bruford's book's slightly different, I think, but if you're writing about career, you don't really write about your personal life much, you know, because if you're going to spend 15,000 words talking about your career, how can you not spend 30,000 words talking about the love of your life? But how can you do that? You know, I do it through poetry, I do it through music, you know, so in other words, it's only going to be about part of my life, the part that people already know something about, but they'll know more about it, and they'll know more about what I think about what was going on. But I still know that there's a big divide about that between that and my actual personal life, and not that my family don't come into it, because of course they do. They can't help but come into it, but they can't justify the meager way that they come into it with any real importance that they have to me. They are more important than everything else that's going on. It's just that I have to talk about my music and I have to do my music. It's my job, and I love that too. But you know, so my book will be about my work, and I hope it will be insightful and quite guitaristic, because that's what I'm all about. So and I hope to finish it maybe even next year. You know, get it finished next year. I don't think there's a big rush. I mean, Bill's book was very illuminating. It wasn't about Yes in particular, although Rick brought out a book. It sounded like it was about Yes, but it also wasn't. So I think my book won't be about Yes either, but it will have a central theme. The central theme may be Yes. You know, and my other bands will feature in it, and my solo work will feature in it a lot. But like I'm saying, you know, don't expect to hear what I do at home, other than a little of that. But so I'm a private person, basically, even though I love to talk and people ask me questions all my life and I answer them. But there again, there's much of me that you don't know about, and that's going to stay the same even when you read my book. But you know, I will get it finished, and I think it might be a realistic plan to have it out by 2012.
Well, Steve, thank you for this great classic interview, because I'm sure it's going to be great.
All right.
Well, thank you very much for the time.
All right, then, Jason. Well, it's very nice. Thanks for all that, because I see it's going to be partly radio and partly print. That's super.
Yeah.
So, are you in Nova Scotia?
Yes, I live in Nova Scotia, Canada.
Yeah. Amazing place. I've only been there once, I think, in 1992. I came there with Asia on a not a big grand tour, but like, you know, more like a club tour, and we played Halifax. Of course, in February it was stunningly cold, and I had to get my car plugged in. I had a diesel car at the time. Of course, we had to plug it in the mains outside the hotel. But that was an amazing experience, and it's quite a country. It must be great in the summer, though. Really lovely.
Summer's better than the winter, Steve.
That's right. But you like winter sports, don't you? You like all the hockey.
Oh, well, we're all hockey fans, yeah.
Of course you do. Because it's bred in you. I mean, it's what you do. It's what you enjoy, because it's what you can do with the environment. It's an amazing environment. All right, then, Jason. Well, thanks very much. Hope to catch you sometime. Say hello. Enjoy the show. Enjoy the music.
For sure. Look forward to meeting you someday.
All right, then, Jason. Hello.
All right. You have a great evening.
You too. Now, bye now. Bye-bye.